Pedro from A&P-REACTS, I'm here today with a legend. I mean, this man does not need an introduction, but he deserves one. So I'm here with none other than Bobby Blitz. How's it going?
Doing well. Like we were just chit-chatting before we started the record button, kind of locked down, trying to hope to reinvent myself, working on an Overkill record, which is business as usual, which is a good thing, and hopeful and optimistic toward the future.
I'm going to leave that mention of the Overkill record for the end of this chat because I want to go back to that. But I feel like if I go into that now, we're going to get sidetracked, and we're not going to talk about BPMD, which is the reason we're here today. I have to start off by asking you, who had the original idea to get this group of guys together and then do an American rock covers album?
Well, the original idea was spawned from Mark Menge's son, 8-year-old Alex. Backyard last July, beers, burgers, fire pit, stereos blaring, Leonard Skinner. Hey, Dad, why don't you guys cover this? And Mark said to him, Metal Allegiance can't do something like this. This doesn't fit. This doesn't fit our profile. It's not our purpose to do classic rock, no matter how much I love it. But I mean, I guess after a few more beers, it started creeping into his head. And before the end of the night, he gave me a call, and I said, "What are you calling me so fucking late? What are you, drunk again?" So, he goes, "I got this great idea." And listen, I bought into it right away. So he got me on board day one, and we instantly discussed songs. And who else? And the first two picks were Mike Portnoy and Phil Demmel, who replied in kind with thumbs up, we're in. So a band was formed in like 24 hours via telephone.
Wow, that was a quick turnaround. You guys didn't fool around. Once you got the word out there, those guys were like immediately on board.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you're a metal guy, and which Phil, Mark, and I am. I mean, Mike is an all-around type guy. I mean, he hits every corner of musical genre. But I think if you're that kind of guy, it's a no-brainer because it's not about all this real extensive hard work and taking a chance. It's about spontaneous success. If the idea was that spontaneous, I think the success could be that spontaneous, and I think everyone kind of picked up on that. So, as for myself, I grew up in that era. I was a teenager, 1973. So, for me, all I had to do was relive my youth. I knew this stuff, and everybody, all four of us, had agreed that especially this American era of hard rock music was for sure the bridge to the heavy metal that we love today.
From the moment that you guys had the idea, that you got the guys on board, how long did it take for you guys to start working on some of the songs?
We recorded within about 3 weeks. Everybody worked in their own respective homes. We flew Phil in from the West Coast. Gathered at Mike Portnoy's house where he has a home studio. He brought an engineer in, and we just started jamming. This was 3 weeks after that phone call. So it was on spontaneous ideas, spontaneously putting the band together and spontaneously recording it. And for me, again, I mean, I really only had to work on a couple of these tunes. It really was getting into the mindset of whatever 50 years ago. It wasn't about, oh, what am I going to do? It was just putting myself back there. So I think that when you think about the spontaneity of it, it was very much recorded like that of a band from the 70s. You get into the studio, you hit record, you do the whole damn record in one take in many cases, So I think that, that kind of worked for its authenticity.
One of the things that I noticed listening to the album is that you guys were able to capture that blue collar vibe that the original tracks had. You were able to capture that on this record. Do you attribute that perhaps to the way how organic the whole process was of putting the guys together, the recording process?
Well, and again, the recording process on that first day was really just the drum tracks, but he had completed all 10 of them in a 10-hour period. And that's where the kind of magic, was captured. But What I think is that we had to reimagine the songs. Obviously, we have different tonalities than they did in the 70s. The production's different. We wanted it to sound organic, but we knew that we were going to have to record it on modern technology if we wanted to make any headway with it. And we're not going to all be in the same place for a month. We're going to be in different places. So we had to use the modern technology. But I think the mindset was there. And I also think, because we all chose 2 songs and then we voted on 2 others, everybody had an equal stake in it. That was the kind of the cool thing about it, was everybody was, okay, these are my 2, these are Mark's, these are Phil's, these are Mike's. And then we voted in American Band and Walk Away by the James Gang.
Well, so it was a very democratic process, because that was going to be my next question, is how do you guys pick these 10 choices? Because I feel for a group like you, like you guys, there would have been perhaps 20, 30, 40 choices of songs that you guys would like to see on the record.
Well, I keep going back to that word spontaneity, because it's really the first 2 that jump into your head. That's really where you're going to go. You're going to go with your gut. And I think it kept it fun. It kept it spontaneous, because there wasn't like going back and going, I changed my mind, this was one of the rules. If, say, Phil picked, he'd pick DOA by Van Halen. I don't have like a inner David Lee Roth. I know there's one David Lee Roth. I get it. So and that's what made that era of Van Halen great. So I couldn't say, hey, listen, man, I got no inner David Lee Roth. The deal is, go find him. Go figure it out.
You got to channel your.
That's right.
So from a perspective of creation, how do you approach an album that's all covers versus a record that's all original material? Do you have to have a different mindset?
Oh, for sure. Creation as opposed to presentation. The BPMD project was us presenting it and finding a chemistry between us. And I think that it happened so quickly. And I think one of those reasons is because of Metal Allegiance. We've all shared the stage with Metal Allegiance. I'm one of the guest vocalists now for the last 3 years. I've written songs with a song with Mark, something that Alex Skolnick had put out. Mike Portnoy's a drummer on it. I've played on stage with all of these guys. I have a great chemistry with Mark. We do a Black Sabbath show every Halloween. Mike Portnoy played drums one year. So I think that it's about presentation when it comes to what this cover record is. When it comes to creation, it's, for me, I don't really think like an artist. I go with my gut. I think of myself more as a craftsman who tries to, make that craft better. We talked early on when we were just shooting the shit before you hit the record button. The way it works for me is I'm a fan of this stuff. You know what I mean? I kind of do stuff I'd like to hear. Not that I'm thinking in some kind of a parallel universe with tangents to what's my craft is. It's my craft and I know how to do it. But that's a hell of a lot different than just presentation.
From the 10 songs that it made to the record, was there any song that didn't make the record that was very close of making it, that perhaps like deep inside you kind of wish that would have made the album?
Nothing that was approached or with regard to all of us playing it. We were trying to make this kind of a challenge game. Pick your 2, everybody else tough shit if you don't like them, and then vote 2 in. And so if the rules were the rules, and that's what kind of made it the challenge and fun, and very much like that Phil pick of DOA, and even Phil's pick of Tattoo Vampire by Blue Oyster Cult. These were songs that of course I was aware of, but I never presented these songs or never thought of myself as presenting these songs. So this is where I kind of had to dig in, and I think that whole challenge game that surrounded the rules of this entire project made it interesting. It made it, you had to succeed. You had to figure out what you were going to do with regard to something you never would have thought yourself doing.
It was an extra caveat. It added an extra challenge to the process. It made the process fun between you guys. It made also you guys, the way I see it, push each other a little bit, and that allows for all of you to have fun in the recording studio together, right?
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, Pedro, the whole reason I did this was for fun. That's the whole reason it started for me. I mean, and still to this day, I mean, it puts that smile on my face. The smile may be a little bit different and a hell of a lot older, but the point is, it still has the same results. So to be able to transport myself from 2019 and being 60 years old back to all the way back to the 70s, where I was 13 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old. I mean, that was a welcome departure from the humdrum, being able to go back and understand why I like music and what were my first experiences with it. So it was a hell of a lot of fun.
Two things I took from the record listening to it that allowed the album to feel like an album, not just a collection of tracks. The first aspect was the track listing. I felt like you guys picked the right order of songs in order to create a record, not just a collection, but like an actual record. How much thought process went into that track listing and get those songs in that specific order?
I think that was just a lucky, I think it was lucky. We knew Wang Gang Sweet Poontang was going to lead it.
Opener.
I mean, it just kicks the door in, and that kind of, adapted intro, the Ted Nugent adapted intro from Double F Gonzo in Nashville one night back then, way back in our past. It just kind of says something like, here it is, here we are, here we come. An American Band on the back end of it was, a no-brainer to finish the record with. Now, everything else in between, nobody really disagreed, because it wasn't like, oh, this has got to be there, Toys in the Attic's got to be here, it can't be fifth, it's got to be second, things like this. That really wasn't discussed. I mean, this was more, once those two were in place, I think everything just kind of fell in luckily with regard to tracks 2 through 9.
The other element that I felt that was really important in the whole record, besides the track listing, was the signature sound. I really felt by the end of it, you guys created your own unique sound. So there were cover songs, but I think you guys are going to hit two different audiences. You're going to hit the audience that knows them as cover songs, and you're going to hit the audience that, for them, perhaps these will feel like original material. Like my son, for example, if he listens to this, he's like, wow, these are original songs. So you guys were able to create tracks that have a signature sound. Was that an important aspect, that you guys wanted to have your fingerprint on how these songs are going to sound like?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's that whole presentation aspect. Phil's bringing his Kemper in. There's a Phil Demmel sound. You don't want to change that. You want Phil Demmel to be Phil Demmel. Pretty much I open my mouth, whether I'm ordering a pizza or behind a microphone, you pretty much know who I am. Or if I laugh, I do that cackle. You know who the fuck I am. So it can't be, that shit can't be changed. It was just about melting it together. And I think what ended up happening was, because we had such great drum tracks, then we had Mark Mengy doing walking bass. He was doing walking bass lines through most of these songs, which is very 1970s. He's a finger player. He's a feel player. And then you add Phil on top of that, and then add me on top of Phil. It almost would appear that it was disjointed. But then we brought in Mark Lewis to, as Mr. Objectivity, to be able to give it the vibe that you're talking about. Did we want that? Yes, we wanted it. But, I mean, was it going to happen without somebody's, good skills behind the mixing console? So I really attribute the fact to that signature sound of it, to Mark Lewis and his input, and seeing it not as we seeing it two-dimensional, but he heard it three-dimensional.
And going deeper into the record, I have to ask you about two specific songs, because the moment I listened to the album, these two ones absolutely jumped at me. And we already touched a little bit on the first one, which was Wang Dang Sweet Poontang. What an opening track. You absolutely destroyed that opening. You killed it. You murdered it. It blew me away. From the moment I pressed play and I hear your voice come on and you do that intro, I was like, okay, I'm in for a ride. Like, you got me for the rest of the record. I'm hooked. Uh, how did you approach that, and what was your thought process going into that song?
When we were doing that fateful day of drum tracks, before we went to record each drum track, we listened to the cut, and somebody said, "Let's do it off double live, Gonzo," and we put it on the speakers in the studio. And the first thing in my head is like, I'm doing some kind of a foul adaptation of that intro, you know. And I mean, I said it's the only way the song's going to work, you know. I mean, it'll separate the song, especially for people who know the tune, you know, or know that version of it. And you know, when I got into the studio, I worked with this guy Johnny Rod, he's been doing the Overkill vocals for me since Ironbound, you know. And I mean, I love the way he works. I mean, he's this dude where it was like, I remember doing something off the Ironbound record, and it was the first take I had with him, and the guy's kissing my ass, you know. And I'm going to myself, this fucking guy, does he think I'm that thin-skinned? I'm like, all right, stop the fucking ass kissing and bullshit. I know it sucked. You know it sucked. So let's get down to work here. Let's redo it. In any case, I go, Johnny. I go, and he's been busting my balls since that cut, right? So I go for Wang Dang. I said, Johnny, put me in input and hit record. He goes, you're rolling, right? And I did that intro in one take. And when we stopped, right? And I heard him through the cans again, dude, that was fucking awesome. He hasn't been kissing my ass since that Ironbound. So I knew we had something there.
So you knew it was for real. You knew this time was for real.
It felt really good to do it. I mean, it just felt great, and it's an iconic introduction, you know, by Ted from all the way back then. You know, we actually sent that track to Ted, and he loves it. So yeah, he was like, really good. You know,
It's almost a sense that you guys were playing live in my living room when I was listening to it. It had that feel to it. Just absolutely kicked in the door. Like no other words to explain it.
Boy, it really worked. I mean, that was a no-brainer as an opener. Once that intro was put in there, it was just like, where else is it going to go? It's got to start it off. Yeah.
100%. The other song I want to talk to you about is Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, which is perhaps a very appropriate title for you guys. How did you approach that track? Because I thought that song was amazing. You guys did an incredible job with that song.
Well, you know, again, it's all about all these bands that we're talking about have, they're identifiable by their tones. You know, it's ZZ Top even before Billy Gibbons opens his mouth. You know what I mean? Based on the tonality of the guitars, etc. And we were going to have a different tonality. We were going to have a different signature sound, like we just talked about. So how do you keep the authenticity of the song and make it legitimate? Well, you know, Phil and I were talking about it, and I said, you know something, I shouldn't sing this whole thing. We should do this like, you know, the back and forth, the way Billy and Dusty do it. And, you know, Mark Mengy was all over it. And then when everything came down, it just became this kind of steamroller of just fun. You know, if anything on that record sounds like, you know, summer's here, you know, turn the stereo up, you know, girls come out to the beach and get some sun in the bikinis. We're going to roll a keg of beer out and we're going to have a great time. It's that song, you know, especially on this record. I mean, with that signature sound that we got. So I think that what really made that song is not just the musicianship of the other three guys, but the fact that Phil and I traded back and forth on the vocals and then sang harmonies through the chorus.
I thought it worked extremely well. I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion, if it was just you on the vocals, the song would come out perhaps a little bit flat. You need that dynamic.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I totally agree. I have no problem sharing the mic. I mean, to me, that's all that does is make the whole thing more interesting, which is really the outcome I'm looking for personally.
Is there any experiences that you will take from this project into your own, like into Overkill? Is there anything you learn, anything new, anything that you'll be putting in your backpack?
I mean, it's a good question. I think, of course, you learn. I mean, you know, if you stop becoming a student of music, whether it be what you've been locked into, like myself, for, you know, a 35-year period, or whether it be something like, Mike does X amount of projects yearly, Mike Portnoy. I mean, he must do, half a dozen to a dozen projects yearly. And I think even for him, it's a learning experience. And he's a great musician. But I think what I would take with me from this, is just quite simply, it's not what I learned, but maybe I learned to not forget why, I started doing this. That it really was about, throwing a case of beer on the floor and, having a few laughs and just trying to make something happen with a smile on your face, and to me, the way everything developed and, the time that we're in as people, the release of this record, hey, man, it's fun. It's a good time. It's rock and roll. It reminded us of why we did it. I think it'll remind a lot of other people why they started listening to that stuff or went back to listen to it if they're younger people than myself.
Do you guys have any plans whatsoever to do another album down the road or even perhaps do something with originals or is this was a one-time thing that you guys got together and did, was fun, but it'll be that?
Well, it's a never say never approach, but when this, I think before the end of that first day, when we were talking about, what kind of impact we would have or, to ourselves, not to the world, what kind of impact this would have on us. I remember suggesting a song, originally saying, I really wanted to do Oh Well by Fleetwood Mac, which was released in the 70s. But in the 70s, Fleetwood Mac was really an English band. They became more of an American band later on. And somebody said, we could do Made in the UK, the 1970s. We could do Made in Europe. We could do Made in the World. Go grab some Triumph from your country or something like that. Hey, yeah. Great. So when I presented Frank Marino, when I presented this to Thomas at Napalm, I presented it as kind of a 3-record plan. So Mark and I talked to Thomas. We were like, man, we're not looking at taking the money and running here. We're looking at, trying to make a punch with 3 records with this. And he agreed. So I think that there's more than a distinct possibility that you will see future records from us. Originals, I'm not sure, but covers for sure.
You guys, how can I put this to you? I'm trying to get the right words here, because when I first got the album, the first thought that came to my mind was, in the year of 2020, I didn't know my life needed a covers album of classic rock songs, and you guys told me exactly what I needed. So that's pretty much what I walk away from this record with, is that sometimes you don't know you need something until it smacks you in the face, and this record will smack a lot of people in the face.
That's a great compliment, man. I mean, that's, but you brought up a lot of good points with your questions. There is already a signature sound to it. The songs are legitimate and they've been reimagined, but they haven't strayed from their original intent.
Yeah.
I looked at this record and I was the only one where a rule was broken, and we realized it later because originally it had to be written in the 70s, but the song Evil that we had done, Cactus reimagined that in the 70s from Willie Dixon, who then passed it on to Howlin' Wolf, who recorded it back in the 50s, and then Cactus in the 70s and BPMD in 2019. It just shows how long that chain of rock and roll is. And sometimes it's great to remember where you came from. And that smack in the side of the face is saying, hey, this feels good, to breathe deep, to know where I've come from.
Yeah, and I think covers does that. And one of the things that I took away from the record that we mentioned already, with you guys creating your signature sound, the way you guys approach the album, the way you guys approach the songs, you have to realize that this gains a life of its own. And for young fans that didn't grow up in that era, that perhaps don't even know those songs, they'll be introduced to these songs through you guys. So to them, this is almost going to be original material. And it's going to be a fun experience when they listen to your version of the track, and then makes them perhaps go back and listen to the original and see the evolution that the song has had through time. So I think that's a great thing that you guys are doing for the history of rock, for the history of metal, specifically with music coming out of the U.S.
I appreciate it. I mean, I agree with you 100%. People should be exposed to, listen, you like Arch Enemy today, you like black metal, you like thrash metal, you like heavy metal, whatever it may be, still like hard rock. it all came from somewhere. It wasn't just created out of thin air. And, you know, you can go back to those, you know, original distorted guitar chords being played at Chess Studios or Sun Studios down in Memphis. And that's the beginning of the chain. You know, well, at least the American chain. That's the beginning of the American chain. So if you do go back there, you as you take steps back, you'll be able to understand some of the similarities to whatever your favorite genres are today.
I agree 100%. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about that overkill question that you started off our conversation with. I promised I wouldn't sidetrack our chat, but I had to leave that tidbit for the end. So you're working on new material. What can you tell us about the new material, at least thoughts in terms of release dates, time frames? I mean, I can use all the overkill I can get my hands on, to be honest.
I got to tell you, for years I've been doing this, right? And Didi will send me a demo with just some like skeletal ideas. You know, there'll be a riff, there'll be some finger drums, puts a bass track in there. He does like a lead. It's all self-produced by himself, home studio. And as soon as I get it, I wait about 7 days, and I call him up on the phone, and he goes, "Hey," I said, "I got your demo." He goes, "Yeah, what do you think?" And every time, I don't know how you expect me to write to this shit. I'm a total professional. I didn't think you could get worse than the last fucking record. It's our little tradition from record to record. But what I see right now with this is, I see it as a natural progression from Wings of War, Grinding Wheel, Wings of War. I think, when we had done the Ironbound record, there almost became a trilogy in there. It was kind of like Ironbound, Electric Age, White Devil Armory. And they seemed to be, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost kind of a thing, and it was, I think we kind of broke the mold a little bit with the Grinding Wheel. And then I think a little bit more with Wings of War. And on this one, I see it way more. And what I mean by that is that we've used other tools from our tool shed in the past. And that's, the slow grind that is coupled with that fast gallop. So it feels like a natural progression, but maybe 2 records ahead of what the Wings of War is. And that's probably as objective as I can be. I mean, there's 10 songs right now. I mean, I'm messing around with them. Dave Linska's messing around with them. Listen, I mean, there's no better time to have the old norm for us during a time when new normal is obviously right around the corner for all of us in the world. So I think that we're going to have more time to write it. And I think this also gives us the opportunity to scrutinize it a little bit more, which we didn't do on the last record. And I'm happy to have that extra time.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have the time now to iron out all the fine print and all the little details and work out all the kinks. There's no tours, there's no shows, there's no festivals, there's nothing happening. Might as well put some effort and put all the work into this record and then have something ready for the fans perhaps next year.
2021 April is what we're targeting. We're looking to start mixing it mid-December. So should be done somewhere around the holidays or delivered in the first week of January type of thing. We've also, we've gone so far as to tentatively search out dates on the release 2021 in the US or in North America for that matter. And then Europe would be October of 2021. That has actually got holds all the way through. But we have the whole festival season that's been canceled from this summer is going to be shifted to summer 2021. So we're going to slide over into that Wacken and the Wacken Cruise and a bunch of other things that we have on the plate.
One last question for you. Once the album is out, are we going to see you in Toronto? It seems like every time Overkill goes on the road with the tour, you guys skip Canada, you skip Toronto, at least Toronto. It feels the last couple of tours. Will we see you up here? I'll show up in a hockey jersey if you want.
I thought, for sure, I thought we were there with Crowbar in.
No. I would have been there. Trust me.
I would have been there better than I do. I remember the Opera House was the last time we were there. I thought, no, was it the Opera House?
Probably at the Opera House, but not with Crowbar. I remember looking at the dates for that tour, and there was no Toronto dates. I was really bummed out because I was expecting to be in the front row, no shirt on, with my tits flying, and you know what I mean? Like, and there was nothing to be had, nothing to be had. So I just hope next tour you guys add a little Toronto stop at the Opera House would be amazing.
Well, maybe that's why we didn't go last time, because you flashed your tits and one of the guys went blind.
Maybe that's why. Maybe I'm the one ruining things. Maybe I'm driving bands away. It's hard for you guys to concentrate on stage when there's a fat dude in the front row with no shirt on. It's really a. I'll bring a men's ear next time.
I don't know. I mean, I would assume that it's always considered. We always worked up there with Noel.
Yeah. With inertia.
Yeah, I forget. Man, I forget I can picture myself standing at the bar with him after the show, and I forget who was there.
Yeah, definitely not the Crowbar. But hey, hopefully next time we'll get to see you here. It would be an absolute pleasure.
You see those vases?
Yeah.
I bought those right next to the Opera House.
Really?
Those big, they're called lava vases. I found them, and I was always looking for something like that. But I'm right next to the Opera House. I forget what year. I mean, had to be.
There's a little bit of 15. Canada with you there, then.
Pardon?
There's a little bit of Canada with you there, then.
Okay, yeah.
Well, Bobby, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I absolutely love the record. You guys did an amazing job with this album. Like I said, it's going to smack a lot of people in the faces, and I think for the new generation, it's really going to open the doors of the history of rock and metal music. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, opening those doors to a new fan base, if you will. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time, and hopefully next year there will be no Corona, and I'll see you guys supporting the new record in Toronto.
Hey, I don't have to tell you to keep the faith because I know you already have it. But stay safe, you and the family. And I hope to see you up in Canada on the next Overkill or even BPMD thing.
All right, perfect. Cheers.